So next on the list of classes of off-meta builds I'm going to be making is the Necromancer. So let's just get straight into there. Necromancer is a pretty interesting class because a lot of Necromancer meta builds still have to be kind of like tailored to each match. So like for example, if I'm playing like the meta Scourge build, right, you still need to change your build up a little bit per match. You can't just run one meta build. So I feel like for the Necromancer, you actually need to have a lot of knowledge of the game to play it, right? It's not just like Warrior where you just put one build down and then you just like go 1v1 all game. Necro is kind of like, well, I have to know what everything is so I don't die, right? Because you're pretty much a prey as a Necro. You can kill everything, but everything wants to kill you. So yeah, so for example, like deciding whether you want to take Corrupt Boon or an extra stun break, or you want an extra escape or more Condi clear, all these kind of things are really important for Necromancer, because how Necromancer works is you don't really have hard mitigation. You kind of have like soft mitigation. So it's like your health pool is like a numerical number, whereas like if you're a thief or mesmer, right, you're just gonna full invuln or evade attacks. And so often how that translates is when you're outnumbered as Necromancer, you take more pressure than if you were like in a 1v1. Like in a 1v1 kind of situation, Necromancers are actually pretty decent because their massive health pool and shroud, it trades 1-for-1 with a lot of enemy abilities. Whereas if they're 1v2, they're taking twice as much damage and the shroud is worth a lot less, right? And so it often takes a lot more resources, right? But like a mesmer or a thief, if they're 1v2 and they're just perma evading, right, they can survive basically as long as they're evading, right? And they'll run out of evades faster if they don't use them correctly, right? But still, it's the same thing. 1v5, 1v1, like evades still avoid the same amount of damage. And so what this means is, right, Necros kind of have to use their resources very wisely in larger fights, right? So that's just kind of like an idea that you want to think about when you're crafting for Necromancer. And so the first build we're going to be looking at today is actually a power core Lich Necro. So the idea of the build is to make use of blood magic and wells, while also being kind of like a sort of like a team fighty, supporty kind of thing. It's not really as supportive as Scourge because you can give barrier to your allies, and your shades will like give Condi clears as well. But you do give blood aura to your allies with vampiric presence, and you can give protection to your allies with the well trait, right? So it is really nice team fight build, and it has the same role as every Necro build, right? Do damage, kill the enemy, snowball, debunk, kill like really tanky people that the rest of your team can't kill, and basically just wreak havoc, right? And this build can do that, even though it has the survivability that it also needs to survive long enough to do that, right? So that's why I think that this build is actually pretty good. So we'll start off saying the sigils and the runes. So I'm taking Rune of Speed, Paladin Amulet, Dagger Focus, Axe Warhorn. So why I do this combination instead of, you'd think, well, Dagger Warhorn is better, right? Because you want to be in melee range when you're using the Warhorn skills, right? Well, Warhorn has actually been nerfed recently, and you don't get as much value from the life stealing in melee range as you used to, and it doesn't even cripple anymore, so it doesn't really matter that much. But more of like, you want to diversify your weapon set. So like this is melee and this is melee. So if I'm in melee, it's really good, but if I'm not melee, then it's like really bad, right? And then likewise for Axe Focus, right? If I'm ranged, Axe Focus is really good, but if I'm in melee, it's not really good at all. So what you do is you diversify it by giving melee and range to both specs, so that you're kind of like this moving force that can do damage at all times. So that's pretty nice. And yeah, so use speed runes as well, because that kind of fits into the idea of having an escape. So like necromancers generally have, you know, they get focus, right? So they need an escape route, but I'm not taking spectral walk on this build, though you can if you're against like heavy condi comms, right? But I don't take spectral walk. So a lot of necro builds now take spectral walk, and that's one of their big like escape skills. So instead I take Rune of Speed, because that gives you like it gives you basically super speed when you have swiftness, right? Which is really good, because moving faster than the enemy means that they like you'll create more distance between them eventually, and that means they need to use cooldowns to keep up with you. And if they're using all their cooldowns to keep up with you, they're not using them to, you know, maintain effective damage uptimes and stuff like that. So I really like Rune of Speed. And Paladin Amulet, you could argue, oh, why don't you just go Demolisher or something like that? Necros have plenty of health, but the reality is you always go Vitality Amulets on Necro no matter what, because it gives you more Shroud, and just like having a like 19k health pool really isn't enough. No matter how much like healing you have, you just don't ever want to be below 20,000 HP. And Paladin Amulet gives you power and precision, which is enough, and a lot of your damage actually comes from Life Siphon, which only scales with power and not with any of your crits or crit damage, right? So you'll often find that the crit damage is kind of irrelevant if you were to take like Demolisher or Marauders. So yeah, and then I take Agility and Cleansing on my Dagger Focus. Usually on Dagger, you'll get the you'll swap to Dagger when you see like a cleave situation happening, and the Agility proc is really good in that situation because you get really nice burst of like cleave damage during that time. And yeah, Cleansing Sigil is just because this build is a little bit light on the Condi cleanse, right? And you can get Cleansing proc when you swap into Shroud as well, because this counts as a weapon swap. So if you're like camping Dagger for any reason and then you go into Shroud, you get the cleanse. And it's also really nice with this trait if you're in Dagger, because it'll remove cripple, chill, and immobilize before it procs your Cleansing Sigil. So it'll remove up to 4 condis if you're in Dagger and you swap into Shroud. And then for Axe I take Opportunity and Exposure, because that is just the best damaging combination for this weapon set. Like, Exposure is, you know, vulnerability, which gives your Axe 2 double the value, right? Because you get bonus damage per vulnerability stack is multiplied by 2, right? So you want that Exposure for the 10% damage increase. And you want Opportunity because you're giving out tons of cripples and stuff, which will increase your damage on Axe, right? And you're also doing Spiteful Spirit, right? So you'll do more cripple there. Yeah, so that's pretty much that. For the traits, I take Spite, Soul Reaping Blood. There is literally no other way that you could run this. Like, there's Curses, but that's kind of like more crit oriented. If you're running like a Condi build, yeah, then you want to use Curses. But if you want to run like a power core Necro, this is how you have to do it. So I take Spiteful Talisman, which increases the damage you do to foes with no boons, which is pretty okay because you have decent amount of boon rip, but it's often not really relevant. And then it reduces the recharge of Axe skills and focus skills. And this is really good because Spinal Shivers is a 16-second cast or recharge, and that also applies to Chill of Death, which is one of your passive traits. When you hit someone below 50%, it removes up to 3 boons and chills them. So this is a really good finishing skill. You don't ever want to take Awaken the Pain unless you're running some kind of like bunker necro. And this build is sort of bunkery, but definitely not in that role. So Chill of Death, definitely good, but this trait with Chill of Death makes the cooldown even shorter, which actually is really nice, because if you double Spinal Shiver someone, like if they're below 50% HP and you double Spinal Shivers them, that's 6 boons, so that'll almost always get you to Spiteful Talisman, giving you 10% extra damage. So that's pretty nice. And yeah, on top of that, you take Spiteful Spirit. You never take Close to Death, right? Because as I said, this is more of a life steal. Like, you don't really get too much damage modifiers with this build. So yeah, Spiteful Spirit is just really insane because you go into Shroud and it corrupts boons, right? It's more boon corruption, and it's just more cripple to add to your chase potential, and just debilitating the enemy and preventing them from doing what they want to do. Also, mind you, Spiteful Spirit can't crit, and neither can Chill of Death, right? So that's another reason why Paladin's Amulet is so good, is because these can't even crit, so only your power coefficient really is scaling with them. So yeah. And in Soul Reaping, I take Speed of Shadows. So I'm not using Staff. If I was using Staff, I'd use Soul Marks almost always, but since I'm not, I'm using Speed of Shadows, which is actually really good, because not taking a Staff is kind of bad, but getting this in return is really good, because you get your Swiftness up time, which pretty much keeps your Rune of Speed constantly going, and it also, as I said earlier, removes all the debilitating conditions. So how this often works is you'll be getting like attacked by the opponent, and then you'll like swap into Death Shroud, right? And then you'll remove all those quantities and get Swiftness, so you'll immediately start increasing the gap between your enemies and you just by going into Shroud. And also you have Foot in the Grave on top of that, so you break stun and you get stability when you go into Shroud. So like if someone jumps on you, you just Shroud, and it's an insane like peel for yourself, which is really needed as a Necro. And yeah, as I mentioned before in one of my earlier videos, right, you need a certain amount of stun breaks on every build. So this one has 1, 2 technically. This would be a stun break sometimes, and then this would be the third one. So like minimum of 2 stun breaks. But how Shroud kind of works is you don't always use it for a stun break, so you don't really have, it's more like 2.5 stun breaks, but you can even go with like 1.5 stun breaks, to be honest, because this is such a low cooldown, and you can, Shroud isn't really as powerful as Core Necro, so you can just save Shroud just for stun breaking a lot of times. And then I take Fear of Death, and this one is kind of like debatable between Soul Barbs, because the 10% damage increase can be like kind of permanent if you just swap in and out of Shroud nonstop. But the thing is, it's just a 10% damage boost. It has no functionality to it. It's just like, you know, you're not going for a heavy DPS build that would want to make use of this. You're kind of going for more play potential, right? And in PvP, play potential is usually more important, and utility is more important than just pure damage. So I go for Fear of Death, and not only does this give you life force, right, which helps you to gain survivability, but it also increases the duration of your fears by 100%. So all of your fears give you kind of like play potential. So I'm not using Staff though, which is kind of sad, because the Staff with Fear of Death is really good, but I'm actually using no Staff. So I only get 1 fear, which is from Doom, and that gives you a 1-second fear when you're not in range, right? You have to be within 600 range to get the 3-second fear, and of course it gets increased by the trait, right? So it's 2 seconds if they're far away and 3 seconds if they're close to you, which is really good, because a long fear can kind of like help your teammates also deal damage, and you will be able to land your damage as well when they're feared. You can do combos like that. So yeah, I like Fear of Death better. So yeah, that's pretty much Soul Reaping. In Blood, you're going for the Blood Well trait, which gives you res potential. It's not amazing. You could go for Quickening Thirst if you really wanted to and remove Speed Rune, but I feel that this isn't really that good of a trait, because it's just when you're above 75% HP. So like when you're in combat and you're below 75% HP, you lose that. So it's kind of like a PvE trait. So Well of Blood is usually better, even though you don't really you can go for reses. You don't really go for like hard reses, right? It's just kind of like if your team is there, yeah, you'll res, and it's nice, right? Because it also gives you a heal when you cast it, right? So you can just tap your allies oftentimes and just get a heal, and then just kind of like counter pressure while they're kind of like getting resustained. And then obviously you have Vampiric Presence, which gives your allies support, damage. It's just a really good team fight ability. It's just extra damage, extra healing. It's just like statistical. This is kind of like PvE, right? But if you think about it, this trait is not really good at all. And then Banshee's Wail is only like, well, you dazed for what, 3 seconds instead of 2, which is kind of good. But this is just pure stats, which seems, I know I just said like I know I just said that you know, playability is better, but I feel like just an extra second on the days isn't better than like making every attack I do and every ability I do like 100 more damage, right? Because a lot of the times I'll be using Axe 2 into Dagger 2, and that's 8 hits each, so that's doing an extra like 1600 healing, right? Like right there. So and damage, right? So that's really good. Last Rites, yeah, that's pretty nice for downed allies. And Vampiric Rituals gives you Life Siphon on your wells, so that deals damage, and it reduces recharge of those wells, so including this one. And it'll give protection to allies that are in the wells when they're casted, right? So if I cast a well over here, it doesn't give protection. But if I cast a well over here, it gives us both protection. So you have to kind of cast the wells on yourself if you want to get the protection. And if you're playing aggressively and you want to use them at range, well, then you don't get the protection. So there's that that you have to remember. And yeah, so the utility skills, I have Consume Conditions. You can take Well of Blood. It's obviously a lot better synergy, right? And you can use that on yourself, and it gives you more healing on average than Consume Conditions, and you can revive and you can heal allies with it. But if you're going against any Condi build, you're going to want Consume Conditions because you have no Condi cleanse other than Well of Power, which isn't really that reliable. You can also go, instead of Spectral Armor, you can go for Well of Suffering if you want to go full wells, like the enemy team is really tanky. But I found that oftentimes you don't really get too much value off of Well of Suffering because they just walk out of it, right? Like you can do Dagger 3 to immobilize them, but often you won't get too much value unless it's a down body, right? And in that case, yeah, it is really good, but you also have Well of Corruption, which is actually better, even though it does less damage. The removal of boons is probably better on downstate bodies, and obviously double well is really good. But yeah, I just found that Spectral Armor is better because if you're dead, you know, you don't do any damage, right? So survivability is usually a little bit more important than going full damage. And obviously Well of Power is really nice because it converts those Condis into boons. So you give yourself more boons and you get a little bit more tanky. And it's also, you can support your allies with this. It's really good in team fights. Wells are just really good for team fights. And yeah, so I take Lich Form you can't really say that there's any other utility that you could take. Like Plague Lands, it's a Condi ability. Golem is okay, but it'll die and it's kind of like clunky. So I mean, the stun that the Golem doesn't really affect you that much, and oftentimes you can't even use it when you want to use it because it's either dead or not in position to do so. So I take Lich Form. Lich Form is really good. Basically how you use Lich Form is this ability gives you it kind of like tethers you to the target, kind of like the Shroud 5 skill, and it just leeches life. So you can see my health pool is getting higher. It steals vitality from them, so it deals damage to them and gives you a higher health pool. And then the 4 skill, you want to use that and it'll summon horrors. So what the horrors do is they kind of just go around and attack stuff and then blow up on the target. It does decent damage, right? The explosion, but it's more of like just like hoarding onto like people with a bunch of stuff and kind of overwhelming them. And that's usually an okay ability to use, but I'll go over the other abilities when I get my Lich Form back. So I'll go over the weapon skills right now. So Dagger 2 gives you healing. It heals you for about like 4k in total, so that's a really good skill to use. They did nerf it though, so you can't use it while walking away. So usually what I do is I just click the 2 skill and then I just kind of like let go of the mouse so that I don't look away, like, because if I do that then it just stops casting it, and if people run around, like, it just stops casting it. And this is a pretty high value ability, so you don't want it to cancel. And then Dark Pact is, you can use that while looking behind you, but you have to finish the cast by looking at them. So it's kind of nice for kiting because you can do a quick turnaround to finish the cast. And what it does is it puts 2 bleeding on yourself, which isn't really, it's negligible because you don't have any Condi damage, so it won't do a big bleed to yourself. It's like 40 per tick. It's basically non-existent. And it'll corrupt 2 boons, which is really good, and it'll mob for 3 seconds, which is also really good, on a 15-second cooldown. So yeah, this is just a really good ability. Then you have your focus skills. This is just a really long range kind of like life leech that gives you life force. You just spam this whenever you're not in range to do anything else. And it gives Vallun, which is also really good because Vallun scales with Axe 2 and stuff like that, and helps your teammates do more damage to the target. And then obviously Spinal Shivers is a really long range boon corrupt. You often enter fights with this ability because it gives so much chill, so it's like a really big gap closer. And yeah, it does more damage per boon removed. I think it can actually crit too, unlike the, yeah, this cannot crit, but this can crit. So you can often get really big damage modifiers on this. So that's really nice. And then for Axe, you have Ghastly Claws. This is your big damage ability. You basically, on your dagger and your axe, your 2 abilities do the big damage to a single target. And then Unholy Feast, well, this gives you life force as well, right? So that's pretty nice. And then Unholy Feast is just like AoE. You can use it while kiting and stuff. Doesn't matter because it just does an AoE around you in a pretty big radius of 600. And it corrupts 2 boons, and it gives cripple, and it'll do more damage to foes who are below 25% HP. So that's nice. Whale of Doom, obviously unblockable 2-second days. You want to use that on like down bodies or blocking warriors or anything that's blocking, because it's an unblockable. It'll interrupt their block. And then Locust Swarm, you just want to basically just spam this for swiftness uptime. You want to get the most value out of it. You're going to want to use it like right before you go into melee range or something, but oftentimes you have better things that you want to use if you're in melee range already. But yeah, it's still a pretty good ability even after its nerf. And then obviously your Lich Form skills, you want to just spam 1 and 2 so you go into Lich, you use 5, you use 4, and then you just spam. I'm literally just pressing 1 and 2 at the same time because this gives cripple and Vallun, and it just like clears blinds and aegis, and then the 1 ability pierces and does big damage. So you want the 1 ability to hit, and the 2 ability you just spam out there anyways because it's doing big damage. And then yeah, so the Shroud abilities are pretty interesting because you have a Fear on your 3, which is instant cast, so there's no animation to it. You have the 5, which reveals. This is the only reason why Core Necro is better than like any other Necro, or could be better than any other Necro, is because of the instant cast Fear and the reveal on the 5 skill, which also does an emote, which is pretty nice. The 2 skill is like a port to the target, but it's like a long clunky animation to get to that point. So I'll show you it. It's like this, and you can do 2, and then you can like walk away and it'll port you in. And then the 4 skill, you kind of just want to use it when you're kiting and stuff, or through walls, and it just does like minor life leech damage and a huge AoE. So it's kind of nice in team fights as well. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Like the playstyle of the build is like, you go in, you press the 5, you press the 4, then you'd swap to Axe, you'd press 2, and then at this point you have a decent amount of Shroud. You can do your 5 or your 3, and then you'd put down like Wells. You'd want to use your Axe 2 again. It's pretty nice that it's on a 6-second cooldown because of this trait. And then if you really think that they're susceptible to dying, you'd go in with your Dagger 3. Otherwise you'd stay in Axe and just keep spamming 2. And then you'd you'd try to immob them with the Dagger 3, Spinal Shivers, and then just auto. And if you really need the healing, you Life Siphon, or if you're at range still, and if you want to do some CC, you can swap into Shroud, do the 5 and the 3, and then usually the 1 skill is not as good as like Axe 2 or even Dagger 1, so you'd want to swap out of Shroud immediately as soon as you fear them to like start getting damage from your other abilities, your more powerful abilities on your weapons. And then if they do survive that and it's like, well, I don't think I can finish them off without using Lich Form, you do something like, go in here and then use all your wells, and you go to the Lich Form, you spam your 1 and 2, right? And then your 3 ability is a kind of like a clunky unblockable Fear, which shoots out a wave, and then you can port to the wave in the duration of the cast. And it's a really good skill because it does decent damage, but it also is a 4-second Fear with Fear of Death. So this is your second Fear on your build, and it's like an AoE wave Fear that has a base duration of 2, so it goes up to 4 seconds. So that's a really long Fear if people don't have any cleanse or stun break for that. And that'll allow you to, but you usually don't want to use the 3 skill because it's so clunky and you have to stand still when you're casting it. So you're generally just spamming 1 and 2 at the same time. And yeah, that's pretty much it. That's how you play Core Necro. You just pretty much lifesteal stuff with the 2 skill to stay alive, and you kite with speed runes, and you have to make use of your animations really well, knowing which ones you can use from behind and then which ones you have to use while facing your enemy, so that you can kite and get the right range and the right positioning so that you can maximize your damage while also having really good positioning to stay alive. So just kind of like getting used to like how you can play and how to manipulate your positioning to kind of like reduce the damage you take and kill your enemy as efficiently as possible. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So right off the bat, even before the match starts, you want to use Lich Form, because I'm not sure if this is a bug or something, but basically you'll get 15% life force when the game starts, because you'll leave Lich Form and it'll recharge Lich Form, but then you'll get like the effect of giving you life force happens after you leave Lich Form, which is like after the match starts. So it kind of like gives you 15% life force at the start. And this is really good because having life force at the start of games is really good, because that's the weakness of Necro. So yeah, I get 15% life force just because I'm running Lich Form. That only works with Lich Form and minions. And yeah, so I'm pretty safe because I have an extra stun break right off the bat. And the Dragon Hunter just jumps on me and pushes me off. So that's completely fine because at least I'm not dying, right? They're zoning me a little bit, but at least I'm not dying. So I put all my wells on the node and I go Lich. And this is a prot hollow, I believe, so I'm not going to be doing too much damage. But I get the nice 4-second fear there. They stun break it, right? But at least it landed, which means I got a bunch of Shroud and baited out a cooldown. And here, it looks like my whole team died. So I'm going to use my speed runes to get out of there and kite. And it looks like they actually overcommit to killing me, and they let our Ellie res. So I made a nice juke back there to get the res. And now I'm getting really hard focused, so I'm actually gonna just leave combat. And that's like the power of speed runes on Necro, because it allows you so much sustain. Just because getting out of combat is like a reset, right? So you can get out of combat and then get back into combat, and oftentimes resetting combat is way better than staying in combat with low health, because it allows you to play more aggressively, right? So if you're low HP, you have to play so safely that you're not really full presence in the fight. So speed runes is really nice because it actually gives you damage in that way by letting you reset and play more aggressively. So here I am versus the Prot Hollow. The one thing that beats that is Corrupts and CC. So yep, I use that, and I actually cap the node, even though I feel like a Core Guard is probably more useful to cap nodes than a Necro. You want the Necro to rotate out. And our Ellie is actually using Treb on mid, which is kind of questionable, but so I think their Soul Beast is here. Yeah, this is a Sikkim Soul Beast, so I immediately go into Shroud, and I dodge right after they use their little porty thing, because they usually do some kind of like CC after that. And I just kind of keep line of sighting while maintaining some of my corrupts. They go into block, and I unblockable daze that, and I just stay on top, keep the corrupts, and just keep hitting them, because if I'm hitting them, it doesn't really matter too much what I do. As long as I'm hitting them, I'm gaining more life because of my vampiric traits. And that's also going to be doing good damage versus this Prot Hollow, because as I said, like life steal, it's unmitigatable damage, right? So if they have protection, it doesn't matter. If they have toughness, it doesn't matter. So what I do there is I fear the pet off with my Lich, but it's not enough, because the pet just starts rezzing right again, right? So it's kind of dangerous. I do have a lot of Shroud, but it goes away very quickly if I'm in a 1v2 situation, right? My teammate comes in, and we can keep focusing the Ranger, and we get the kill because he's basically out of cooldowns, right? So I baited all of their cooldowns in a 1v2, and my teammate comes in really quickly. So that's what's really good about kind of side nodey builds that have a lot of pressure to them, is they get +1 very easily. And while this is not really a side node build, it does have a lot of sustain. So that's really nice. It's often kind of better than like a Scourge build to play this, because it is tankier than a Scourge, but it obviously does a lot less damage than a Scourge. But if you're in a situation where you're 1v2, then this is obviously better than a Scourge. But obviously that's not really your role. The role of Necro is to find even or even +1 fights so that you can get kills. Like you don't want to be like kiting the whole match. You want your team to be with you in a way. But yeah, we do get the kill here, and I'm just using my dagger auto on it to cleave it out as fast as possible, because it gives me life force as well, and having full life force is always really strong in Necro. So you basically, when you have full life force on Necro and you're not Scourge, you have like, it's like a second life bar, right? So that's pretty nice. At this point, we've gained most of the map. Pushing far is not really what we want to do. I want to look for respawns, right? Because they probably want to push our home again. So I'm looking to stop their prot hole from going to our home node, and I'm trying to like watch home, right? Because that's the thing. My role isn't really to watch home, but if no one does it, then it's good, right? Like, it's better than if I try to play into my role too much and no one does it, right? It's not ideal, but it's someone's got to do it, right? So it may as well be me. And that's kind of what's nice about this build is it can kind of fill different roles. It's sort of supporty with its blood magic and resin capabilities. So it's really good in team fights, but it also does high damage, so it's good for +1s and corrupts as well. But it also has good sustain, so it can sort of like 1v1 a little bit, and the unmitigatable lifesteal gives you that, you know, potential to do damage to those really tanky players. At this point, we're in like a 2v3, so I'm just using my speed runes to jump around on terrain, and their hollow has lost interest because of that. And we actually, okay, so I see a kill on the ranger over there, but I really want to support my ranger over here because I don't want him to die, right? And just being near my ally there gives him the presence, right, vampiric presence, which gives him a little bit of sustain. It's actually not something to laugh at. Like 100 lifesteal per hit, it adds up in team fights, especially when you're like, the more things you hit. So like if you hit 5 targets with one well, for example, that's 500 per tick. So it's a lot, and it adds up, like I said. So here they're gonna go for the res, and we're kind of outnumbered, and yeah, I try to get the res on my teammate there, but I get pulled and pushed, and I actually had full shroud there. I shouldn't have left shroud because it wasn't really safe. That was a situation where like leaving shroud is kind of really risky. So I should have stayed in shroud there because I had so much shroud to spare, and I probably would have survived that 100% if I just stayed in shroud longer because I had full shroud. So that's one thing you have to be kind of aware of with this build, is that while you're in shroud, you're really not doing that much damage. Like you do get a lot of value from going into shroud, right, with the stun break and the corrupt from the spiteful spirit, but you don't really do too much after the 5 and the 3 skill, right? But sometimes it's better to just stay in shroud because you need the survivability, and you have to make that call, right? Whether you need the survivability or you want to leave and do more damage with your weapon skills. So yeah, that was a misplay on my part, a misjudgment rather, of how much pressure I was about to take. So my teammates are just kind of getting that kill off the node while I hold the node so we don't get decapped to ensure the win. And at this point, yeah, we just need to hold home to win this game. So I'm watching home and just kind of making sure, like, you know, the state of the game doesn't change too much, and then we get the win. So yeah, that's core Necro. A little bit of damage potential with Lich form as well, but mostly it's just kind of like this bruisery kind of Necro role. So the next build I'll be showing you is a Condi Scourge. I know, very creative, very innovative, but I've tried to do a lot of different things with Scourge, like a Minion Master Scourge, and that was kind of like terrible, where I tried to like support my minions with my barriers and stuff, but it's just not good. And I don't want to say like, oh, this build is off meta, but then it's like completely terrible. I want the build to at least be playable, right? So for Condi Scourge, Power Scourge didn't really work either for me. So I felt that the best thing I could do for a somewhat off meta build would be a Terror Scourge. And basically, the idea is, right, you have fear, you have AoE fear from range with your shade skill, with your staff skill, and even you can get fear from sunless runes, and of course spectral ring, right? So you have a lot of fear methods, and this is really good with Scourge because of how the shade skills work. They give torment on every every shade skill gives torment, and right, you take demonic lore for more torment damage, and you force people to walk or to move and get the extra torment tick damage while they're feared, which is really nice. So yeah, that's pretty much the idea. So it's pretty much just normal Condi Curse's Scourge, right? You take Plague Sending for the Condi Cleanse, you take Terror, of course, you take Weakening Shroud for the extra weakness, and the Corrupt when you go into Shroud, and you go for Soul Marks, obviously, because you want to get that life force with your staff, and then you take Fear of Death. And this is interesting because it actually gives you a lot of life force, right? Because you have so much access to fear that it allows you to not take Nourishing Ashes, right? And Nourishing Ashes is kind of a really insane trait because it makes your life force basically constantly full. So you never really have to think about, like, oh, do I want to use the shade skill? You can basically use them off cooldown. But with Fear of Death, instead of Vital Persistence, I guess, you can kind of do the same thing without having Nourishing Ashes. And that allows you to take the extra Condi Cleanse on Abrasive Grit, and of course a little bit extra Might, which is kind of not that good, but it's only 6 seconds. But the Condi Cleanse is pretty good, and yeah, you just have a ton of Shroud that you can use. It's going to be a little bit less than Nourishing Ashes, but it's still going to be enough where you can comfortably use your shade skills. And then obviously you're going to want to do Doomfire because that's really really powerful skill on your shade skills because it procs off them. And then Sadistic Searing is really good because it just gives you more burns and lowers the cooldown of punishment skills, which includes your Elite, which is really broken, Trail of Anguish, which is really, really good. It's a stun break, and it gives tons of burning and boon corrupt, and a little, like, it's your only stability basically, and it makes your heal also lower cooldown, which is really good too because it gives you effectively about 7,000 health. Plus, you know, it gives you 1 Condi Cleanse, and it does it for your allies, right? It gives them barrier. So that's really good for like a Necro heal to be 20-second cooldown, because if we look at Consume conditions, this is a 30-second cooldown, and Will of Blood 30 seconds. So like Sand Flare being on a 20-second cooldown is really nice, and you could get Master of Corruption, right, where it makes Consume a 20-second cooldown, but then you're not going for Terror, and that's kind of the point of the build, right? So Sand Flare is really good against power builds especially, and having a 20-second heal is just pretty strong. So yeah, that's pretty much it. You know, you want to go for Demonic Lore. You could argue for Sand Savant because it allows you to land your fears more reliably, which would give you more, right? It would give you more life force because of Fear of Death. But I feel like the combo potential of getting like that huge torment damage combined with burn is just so rewarding when you can just one-shot people off a really good fear, right? If you can land it, right? So there's a little bit of a skill aspect there to using Demonic Lore. And also, if you look at the radius of Spectral Ring, which is a skill you're going to be using a lot, It's about like this big, and if you look at the shade skills, it's the same exact size. So what you can do is you can put the spectral ring down, and then you can put your shade in it. And if they want to, you know, play around the spectral ring by not like walking through it, then they're forced to stand in your shades, right? So that's really nice. And as far as the weapons, I go with Scepter Torch. Scepter Torch is just the, you know, the highest damage that you can do. And Torch is a very combo oriented weapon set, right? Because the knockdown is really nice and allows you to set up your shade skills, and you can get the fears off of that and stuff. So it just works so well with the fear combo chain playstyle of the build. So yeah, you want to go with Torch, and it is really high power creep, right? Well, it's been nerfed actually, to be honest. But yeah, so on Scepter and Torch, I go for Annulment and Revocation, and the reason for this is because the build actually lacks a little bit of boon rip, because I go for terror because I go for terror instead of Path of Corruption, which is extra corrupt, right? And yeah, so if your enemy has stability on them, right, it kind of makes half your build irrelevant, right? So you want to remove as many boons as possible so that you can land your fears. And Annulment and Revocation are just the biggest, you know, they're the only way to remove boons through sigils, right? So you just take them and you put them on your Scepter, because you combine that with your Scepter 3, which corrupts 2 boons. So for example, you start off every fight like starting with Staff, and then say they use like a stability, and then you immediately swap to Scepter, and you remove 3 boons immediately on the first hit, right? This has a 10-second ICD, but the first boon will be removed immediately. This will remove 2, and then this will corrupt 2. So you can remove 5 boons, which can pretty reliably get rid of stability, and then from there you can you know, use your Spectral Ring, and then from there you can manifest Sandshade and do your Garish Pillar, and you get off nice combos at that point. So yeah, and then on Staff I take Escape Energy, just because Staff is more of a defensive and kiting weapon. So when you want to kite, you remove a bunch of debilitating conditions from yourself, which is also really nice for stuff like Abrasive Grit, right, where you can press your weapon swap and remove all the movement impairing conditions, and then you can use a barrier and then remove the actual damaging conditions. So you kind of like clean off your Condi bar with multiple tools. And then obviously I use Energy Sigil, because that is really nice on Necro, because you only have 2 dodges. So having more than 2 dodges, like 2.5 dodges, is pretty good. So yeah, there's that. And I go for Deadshot Amulet, because this scales the best with curses. You take any kind of precision on Necro with curses is really good, because whenever you crit, you have a chance to give bleeding, and you have a high % chance to crit, because whenever your target has conditions on them, you do like 2% more crit chance per condition on them, and you gain condition damage based on your precision, right? So it's just better than Carrion, right, to go for Deadshot, right? Even though like Carrion gives you what? Let's see, 1491. So it gives you like 14 more condition damage to go Carrion than Deadshot with curses. So Deadshot is 100% better than Carrion, right? Because the only thing Carrion gives different is the power and like slightly more vitality, and then Deadshot gives you the expertise and the precision, which is really good. So yeah, 100% go Deadshot Amulet with Curse of Scourge every time, or some kind of like Wanderers maybe, but vitality is better on Necros than toughness. And then for the rune, I would go with Sunless rune, because whenever you use your elite skill, you can fear enemies, and the animation is kind of like you use it and then it fears, right, a little bit after. So it's kind of weird, the timing of it, but it's still really good because the range of the fear isn't that short. And like the rest of the rune kind of is nice, right, because it's minus incoming condition duration. So like this build doesn't have too much Condi clear on it. You have Spectral Walk, you have some barriers to remove Condis, you have your Staff 4, you have Nefarious Fervor, which also removes converts condition into a boon, and then you have your Plague Sending, and then that's pretty much it, right? So I mean, having the extra condition duration reduction is pretty good, because you don't have any like hard, like if you were to run Plague Signet, that would be like a hard condition transfer, right? But yeah, just having the ability to fear people is really good with this build, right? Because it's not a 1 second fear, it's a 2 second fear because of fear of death. And in the situations where you want to use your elite skill, the fear is actually very good, right? Because you're usually using it on like a down body, and if there's a down body, there's people gonna try to res it and you want to fear them off. So that's really good in that situation. However, this build is very low on swiftness uptime because you usually don't want to use Spectral Walk just for swiftness, and Trail of Anguish is just 6 seconds of swiftness. So I could really see someone going for like Rune of the Traveler just for a constant movement speed increase. That's also really good, especially on certain maps like Capricorn, where there's a lot of movement between nodes, and if you don't have any swiftness, or you'd have to waste your swiftness utility, you know, it would be kind of detrimental if you needed that utility later. So yeah, Rune of the Traveler is also good, but Sunless is a little bit more synergy, obviously, with the build. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the traits and stuff. Like the gameplay is very simple as well. You just want to spam. What I like to do is when I put down a shade, I just use F2 and F3 at the same time. Like, there's really no point in making a distinction between the two unless you really like. There's a situation. Oh, I really need a Condi cleanse. Well, in this case, you would get a Condi cleanse from this as well. So actually, Sand Cascade is sometimes, well, it doesn't convert it from a Condi to a boon. It just removes it, right? So. But if you just wanted to remove it, then yeah, it's just better to use Sand Cascade in most situations. But usually you'll have enough Shroud to use both anyways. So you usually just, you know, pressure like this and just press both at the same time. But yeah, you usually start out with the Chill and then maybe bait out of dodge. Then you fear them into swap weapon, and then you would remove like 5 boons right there. If the enemy had stability, you wouldn't be able to fear them, so oftentimes what you do is you would swap into your Scepter, and then you wait a little bit, and then you'd remove the stability and knock them down, and then you go for the fear combo from there with your Sandshade into Garish Pillar. So there's a lot of ways that you can go into your fear combos. So like, you start out either with the fear here, or you start out with the knockdown into the fear on your Sandshade, or you can even do the Spectral Ring combo where they're forced to sit in all of your stuff there, and you can even fear them through the fear wall, which is really good because they'll get feared for even longer. And Spectral Ring is actually really good against Revenants, which are the meta right now. Because how it works is when the enemy gets feared, right, they walk away from you. So if you stand inside the Spectral Ring and a Revenant ports to you, they'll be put inside the ring, right, and they'll be feared. So like, I'm standing here, the fear wall is around me like this. They get feared outside the wall, right? So they're facing, this is the Revenant, he's facing this way. So if they use the Shiro dodge to break the stun, they dodge back into the fear wall. right? And they get feared again, right? So the only way that they can stun break it is through like the glint stun break. So it's really good versus revenants because it forces them to stay feared. And yeah, that's pretty much it. You just want to combo people. So get through your just want to set up situations, bait their cooldowns, keep pressuring, and you know, get those combos off. And you just kill people really fast. And yeah, don't be afraid to mash your shade skills, because that's kind of like, that's how you're supposed to play Scourge. You just mash those buttons. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So in this match, I'll be playing the Terror Scourge, and I've slotted in the Traveler rune, so I'm not going for the big Sunless rune combos. I feel like the Traveler runes does end up being a little bit more value, right? Because if you're forced to use your utility skills, right, the Spectral Walk and the Trail, you're forced to use that for movement. You're just not going to have it up for when you need it, right? For like stun breaks and stability and boon corruption, or juking enemies and stun breaks again. So yeah, I feel like Traveler Rune is just way more value than the extra Sunless. But yeah, the Sunless could be good too if you expect to have like a Revenant or like a Guardian giving you swiftness all the time. But yeah, so I immediately jump on the Hollow here, and I use the Torch skills behind the wall. This is why Torch is so good. It's not because the knockdown is really good. It is good, right? But it's more of the fact that you can use them behind walls, which means that you can kind of pressure enemies during windows where they wouldn't normally be pressurable, and it kind of keeps your damage uptime very good, right? So that's why Torch is such a really broken skill set right now. And I get the down on the Guardian, or the Hollow, and I just put a shade down, right? There's pretty much nothing in the game that can really res against Necro Cleave except like a Signet from the Guardian, or like some kind of like res trait, right? So Scourge is insane damage right now, and I know this isn't like an off meta build, really. Like, this is pretty meta right now, but the ability to do combos and stuff is actually pretty interesting with the Torch and the Fears. So we'll see if I can get some of that off here. So I'm looking at their Guardian. I'm actually targeting the Weaver now, and I'm just looking to get some pressure off. The Torch 4 is actually really good. It's been nerfed, but it's really good still because of that ability to go through the wall and just have that wide range. And I'm seeing that the Ellie just used all of their stability, so I go in for the Fear combo, and I miss my Staff 5, but they've used most of their, right, like, they get stability from stances. So whenever they use a bunch of their stances, they don't have too much stability left. So like at that point, I knew I could just CC them till they died, right? So here I'm going to cap mid, but I don't really want to full cap it. I'm pretty sure I'm just going to decap it. Yeah, I just decap it, and then I go into far, because if my Guardian dies, then, you know, we lose mid anyways, right? So I want to prevent us from dying here. So I get a bunch of pressure while kiting this Necro. So that's like one of the most important things to learn as Necro, is understanding the skills that you can use while kiting, right, and looking backwards. So I could really keep the distance between me and the Hollow, but I'd also be doing damage to them. So they wouldn't be doing damage to me, and I would be doing damage to them, right? And that's just a free trade, right? So I'm going to push into this 1v1 because it's a very confident matchup. Pretty much every version of Necro is good against Hollow. And yeah, you can see all the condies that I put on the Hollow. He didn't really get any cleanse on that. I can put some shade on the down body. So I choose to breach here just to cleave it out. Yeah, I didn't want any funny business to happen, so I went in with the full damage. I put the ring around the Ellie, but they do have stability, so they can get out. At this point, though, I have a hollow with me, so there's really no way that an Ellie can survive a hollow and a Condi Scourge. So that's pretty nice. Their Guardian does go in for the res, but here I can... Yeah, so I just have enough pressure to make sure that this Guardian goes mid. But I don't want him to regroup with this team, because a Guardian by itself is really weak, but a Guardian with his team is top tier. So what I want to do is I want to chase this Guardian and just basically bully the Guardian, because it's going to force their team to like lose a lot of synergy. So just doing this and putting the Guardian on respawn is very beneficial to my team, right? So we get that kill with a nice, I just basically mashed all of my shade skills, right? But now Warrior is kind of it's kind of like a really easy class to kill if you land damage, right? Because they don't have a lot of Condi cleanse other than their Shake It Off, right? So if you've got constant pressure going, they need to shake it off to remove it, and then they run out of Shake It Off very fast because it's a long cooldown. It's a really heavy hitting cooldown, so it has a long cooldown. So yeah, what you want to do against warriors is just spam as much as you can, and then once they don't have Shake It Off anymore, you want to start using your fears. So like they cleanse because Shake It Off is a Condi cleanse and a stun break, they'll use just Shake It Off early on if you fear them early on. So what you want to do is beat out some of their Condi cleanse from Shake It Off, right? And then start going in for the fears, because then you'll get way more value out of your conditions while they're feared. If they can't stun break them, right? So here I'm going to push into far. It looks like we own pretty much the rest of the map, so there's really not much for me to do. I just need to make sure that the map state doesn't go haywire. So I'm looking to get the aggro of their Revenant right now. And I juke a little bit with the Spectral Walk because I got CC'd, even though it's not a stun break, to take the Spectral Walk back. The positioning that I gain is basically as much as a stun break, right? So Spectral Walk kind of like counts like 2 stun breaks in some situations. And then, yeah, so as you can see there, I put the Fear Wall on the Rev. And how it works is when you Fear Wall a Revenant, if you're inside the Fear Wall, they kind of like fear away from you. So if they want to use the Shiro dodge after the fear wall, they like dodge back into the fear wall, right? So it's basically they can't remove it unless they use like their glint, or they swap into glint, right? Those are the only 2 stun breaks that would actually work. And here they go for the res, but I have just so much Condi that the cleave is just insane, right? Scourge is a bit broken in its damage because it's so bursty. I suggested that Scourges should not be able to use their shade skills all at the same time. There should be like an ICD to make it less bursty, but they'd have like the same damage over time, just not as bursty, right? So that's kind of like the pressure of Necros, is understanding when the enemy won't dodge your shade skills and then like precasting a bunch of them into your shade. So it's kind of uninteractive, but you can get, if you're playing Necro, it's what you want to do to get a lot of damage out. And I have like 10 burns here, and I cleanse them all with my, the barrier trait that gives me Condi cleanse when I barrier, and using my heal. Got kind of lucky there that I greeted and didn't get punished for it by not using my Spectral Walk cooldown. But at this point, yeah, we've got so much Condi pressure that the Ellie has no chance of surviving, right? So that's kind of the nice thing about Scourge, right? Is that while you are kind of susceptible to being killed by a lot of things. If you have really good positioning and game knowledge, you can survive very well, and then you can use the extreme power of the Scourge to kill everything, right? Because it is the highest pressure in the game, the Scourge build. The Curse of Scourge build, that is. So, yeah, that's pretty nice. And here, just using my Spectral Ring to peel for my allies. It does give them protection, which is really nice. But it also allowed me to just wipe their whole team, because they have to choose, right, between getting feared by the Spectral Ring or standing inside the Spectral Ring and eating all my shade damage. And the play is really to eat the fear, right? So it's kind of like a lose-lose situation for them, which is pretty nice for the Necro, right? To be able to use that. So yeah, as I said, not the most off meta, but you know, the fear interactions with Scourge are actually kind of interesting. So I thought that maybe I could share this build a little bit. And finally, I'm going to give you guys one of my favorite builds that I've been recently working on for Necro, and it's a hybrid Condi / Power Scourge, and it uses Spite and Curses instead of like Soul Reaping or any of that stuff. So it's really aggressively oriented, but it also uses Blighter's Boon and Aristocracy runes to get a lot of sustain on top of that, right? So this is an Axe, Warhorn, Scepter, Dagger build, and I use double Courage Sigils because you want to be constantly proccing your Blighter's Boon, because that's where your sustain comes from. And Wizard Amulet, because this has a lot of power coefficients as well. And of course you want precision, so you don't want to go carrying. You want to go precision because precision is just insanely good with curses, and I'll talk about that later. And then I have Aristocracy runes, which is more Condi oriented than power, but it does really give you a lot of good power damage too, because it gives you tons of might. So it gives you 5 stacks of might for 4 seconds after inflicting weakness with a 1 second ICD. But this build gives out so much weakness that it's pretty much you're going to have 25 might constantly. And that's going to be insanely good for your Condi damage, but also your power damage. So I feel like the Aristocracy rune really makes the synergy on this build really feel like it does damage. And then, so for sigils, I have exposure on Axe, and that's because on Axe you have the extra vulnerability effectiveness on the Axe 2. So exposure is always good, and it also scales with Condis, right? Vuln gives Condis more damage percentage as well, so it's just a really good hybrid sigil. And I take escape on my Scepter Dagger instead of like agility or annulment, because the build doesn't really have that many escape tools, I would say. So having escape is, I mean, it's literally called escape, right? But getting immobed is really harsh on Necro, and you just want to like clean off as many Condis as you can, so that you're, because what this build has is it has a lot of Condi cleanse, but it's not like hard Condi cleanse. It's kind of like soft Condi cleanse. So like 1 Condi cleanse here, you have a couple Condi cleanse on Dagger, which isn't really, it's not reliable, right? And then you have a couple Condi cleanse on Plague Sending, and that's also kind of not reliable as well. So you want to kind of clean off as many Condis as you can, and then use some of your other Condi cleanses. And then of course you have Spectral Walk, which is a really good Condi cleanse, which is pretty much every Necro build is using. But yeah, so I'm using Plague Sending, of course. This is just really good because you're going in and out of Shroud very often, and it just transfers 2 Condis. That's very good for countering Condi builds, but also increasing your Condi pressure. You could take Chilling Darkness. I actually found that this is a really good trait because you actually have 2 blinds. So Deathly Swarm, you have your Shroud 2, and even if you Corrupt Fury, you would blind someone. So you actually have a lot of chill up time. And that's really, really good synergy with this build, because chill gives you Vuln, and chill gives you damage bonus, and it's one of the best conditions, right? So I actually really like this trait. However, practically speaking, you can't go for the synergy because you really need the Conti Cleanse from Plague Sending, and this actually ends up giving you a lot of Conti Cleanse because it's like 2 Conti's Cleanse every, what, like 10 seconds you go in and Shroud. So yeah, unless it misses, of course. And then, as you can see here, you get Fury when you enter Shroud as well, which is good because it's more precision, right? It's not precision, but it's more scaling with your crit chance that you have. And it also procs your Blighter's Boon, right? So that's really nice. And of course you want the precision here because you have bleeding. Whenever you crit, you have a 33% chance to bleed. And you also get increased condition damage based on your precision. So that's kind of why precision is really good with curses, because it's extra scaling. And if you look at the if you just look at like an amulet that gives power and then no precision and then condition damage, it's, well, you'll look here, like look at my condition damage, 1428, and then Carrion has more Condi damage on it, but look at that, 1505. So this has 1200 condition damage but no precision. And then I go for wizards, and I have only like less than 100 less condition damage, and that's because the precision is giving me Condi damage as well, which is, it makes up for that. And then I also get more power and then only slightly less vitality, right? But it's way more damage because you have that precision as well for your crits, right? Because this is a hybrid build. So yeah, the whole synergy is around hybrid damage and doing tons of damage from both methods, because you have so much vuln, you have so much might, so it's just scaling in both directions. And that's kind of interesting because a lot of hybrid builds don't do that. They kind of are like more Condi than power, or more power. Most hybrid builds are more Condi than power, but this one is a little bit like both at the same time. So that's nice. And it doesn't really sacrifice too much to get into both of those damage sources. And then also we're going to have Path of Corruption, which gives you 2 corrupts when you use your Shroud 2. And Weakening Shroud, which is where a lot of the synergy from your aristocracy comes from, right? Whenever you crit, and that's another reason why you want precision, is just basically if you go into curses you need crit chance, right? Because all of it is kind of like based on crit. So yeah, whenever you crit, you will do weakness, and your weakness uptime is really high because of this trait, and that gives you might, and that gives the enemy less power damage, so it gives you a lot of sustain. And it also gives you a lesser enfeeble, which converts another boon. So yeah, that's pretty nice. And in spite you go for Bitter Chill, right? Which is whenever you chill, you get Vuln. As we said, Vuln is really good for both damage sources. You get Reaper's Might, which is really nice with Blighter's Boon. So if you're in Shroud, you can just press the 1 skill, and you're getting Might, even if you're not hitting anything. Like, you get 2 Might if you have Courage Sigil, right? But because you're pressing that 1 skill, you're proccing Blighter's Boon, which is healing you. So if there's nothing else to do, then just press 1, right? And you get Vuln here, which is more synergy, and I take Chill of Death instead of Awaken the Pain. Yeah, this gives you less condition damage anyways. Dread, there's not really much there, so yeah, this is pretty much what you want to take, Chill of Death, because more boon rip. And this is just an insanely good skill, right? The chill is 6 seconds long. It's insane. And then, yeah, just more might when the target is below, which is more damage, more healing, more sustain. And then Spiteful Spirit, which gives you Retail, which is more Blighter's Boon synergy. And it gives Cripple, and it removes more boons. So, like, when you go in Shroud, you're going to proc a Lesser Enfeeble, and you're going to proc a Spiteful Spirit. So, when you go into Shroud, it's like a heavy kind of like turning point in a fight, because you rip it like 3 boons-ish, and then you can rip 2 boons again from Death's Charge. It's just really really good to go in and out of Shroud very often because of that, and not just stay in Shroud. And that's kind of how this build works, right? Because you've got the Blighter's Boon synergy. You want to be getting the value from all of your skills at the same time, not just camping one. And yeah, so in Reaper I go for Chilling Nova just because. Oh wait, no, I don't go for Chilling Nova. You would want to go for the Shout trait, right? Because I'm actually using 4 shouts. So Chill to the Bone is obviously a shout. I use Your Soul Is Mine, You're All Weaklings, and Suffer. So Suffer is basically the best like utility for Reaper because of how it's so versatile. So like what you can do is, like, if I go up to someone and I just started the fight, they have no condies on them. If I press Scepter 3, it does nothing, right? Because they have no condies on them, and unless I corrupt boons, right, it wouldn't put any condies on them. But if I precast it into a Suffer, then, you know, I get Chill, Vuln, and if it crits, it would put Weakness as well, and then I would get 3 Torment. So it's just like really good with Scepter 3 to precast. It's also really good for removing blinds. So like if you're casting Chilled to the Bone and the enemy tries to blind you or put up an Aegis beforehand, you can clear the blind and then make sure that your Chilled to the Bone actually hits. And this is really, really good in team fights because there's so much Aegis being like thrown everywhere, and Suffer just removes it all. And it's a really low cooldown, and it's an even lower cooldown the more enemies you hit. And the same thing goes with You're All Weaklings. This just gives weakness. It's more synergy with your might, more synergy with your Blighter's Boon, and it gives weakness, which is more synergy with the Weakening Shroud, or with the Aristocracy runes. And it's a stun break that's pretty low cooldown, 22 seconds. So that's nice. Your Soul Is Mine. This skill is pretty useful because unlike most other Necro heals, it's an 18-second cooldown. So it gives you pretty good sustain. However, it doesn't cleanse condies, so you kind of lack the condi cleanse, right? But it is a low cooldown if you look at all these other heals. 30 seconds, 30 seconds, 30 seconds. So yeah, Your Soul Is Mine being 18 seconds gives you pretty good sustain, and you can use it off cooldown and get life force, even if you're not in combat. So like, or if you don't even hit anything. So like you want to use Your Soul Is Mine basically off cooldown, unless you think you're about to get into a fight and you want to use that there. And it's also damages people, so you can use that as well to remove Aegises and stuff in team fights or whatever. Or like if someone gives you blind and you really don't want to waste your next ability, you can use Your Soul Is Mine. And it's really, really good when you hit multiple targets, right? Because it lowers the cooldown even more and gives you tons of life force. So yeah, that's why I take the Shout trait. As you can see here, the recharge reduction based on how many people I hit, 5% each target, and then a base 10%, and then it gives you extra life siphon as well, which is pretty good. Whenever you inflict fear, you also chill. That's not really too important because I only have 1 fear. But I have plenty of corrupts, so you can get some nice chills off of fears. Yeah, Chilling Victory, just more synergy with the build. Whenever you have chill on the opponent, you hit them, you gain might and life force. So it's just Blighter's Boon synergy. Soul Eater, more like a power trait, and Decimate Defenses is more of a power trait as well because it's just giving you crit chance, whereas this is giving me power and condition damage. And then obviously I do more damage to chilled foes, which is good for my power scaling. And then obviously, as we've been talking about, Blighter's Boon. So let's look at like if I'm in a team fight and I use my Your Soul Is Mine, I gain 5,000 Shroud from hitting max targets. That's really good because it keeps the like this is a spite and curses build, right? So you don't take soul reaping, and soul reaping is one of the ways that you would gain a lot of your life force, right? And I'm also using very low amounts of spectral skills. So if I were to use like spectral skills, they would still not like give me as much shroud as I'd want, because I can't use like your soul is mine actually keeps your life force pretty healthy. Like if you finish a fight and then you've used up every single bit of shroud to finish that fight, and you're waiting for the next fight, you can just charge up your shroud and then get like at least enough to go into shroud really quick and get your huge procs off. And yeah, just having your soul as mine allows you to constantly be gaining life force at all times, so it's really nice. And as I said, in team fights you're just spamming so many AoEs that you're hitting like tons of people and proccing weakness and chills everywhere. So yeah, that's really nice. As far as like what you want to be doing, like your damage kind of comes from, so like you'd immediately start on someone and you'd kind of like open with your scepter and dagger 5 and kind of like bait off some of their cooldowns, and then auto attack on scepter little until you think it's good to feast of corruption, and then as soon as you feast of corruption, you've removed a decent amount of their boons. You want to axe 2 with suffer up, so axe 2 and suffer, and that puts on some vuln and gives you a decent amount of burst, right? Because you've put in about like 5 condies on them by then, which gives you crit chance, right? So that'd be about like 10% more crit chance. And then after you've used all of your like weapon skills, you usually want to go into shroud just to pop it in and do like the 2, the 4, and if you think you can land the 5, do that. And as soon as you do that, just leave and keep spamming your skills like this. So you can create distance there. Someone jumps on you, you want to stun break, get some more life force, go back in shroud as soon as it's off cooldown to get all those procs, and then as soon as you want to leave, just leave immediately, because there's not much else you want to do in shroud unless there's like a lot of people on top of you, in which case you'd want to spam the auto attack for the sustain, right? So I can just keep doing this, and look at my might. My might is maxed out this whole time. There's no way that this build needs this much might, but it's still giving you Blighter's Boon synergy, so it's good, right? And the faster you ramp it up, the faster you get your burst off. And this is a very bursty build, because as soon as you pressure shroud, right, you're doing tons of condies at that time. So yeah, just spam your, you're basically just spamming your shouts, and you want to use suffer in a way that kind of like hits people in between their animations, right? Because it's an instant cast skill, right? So you can land it very reliably, and to land it reliably is really good because it puts out chill, and that disrupts your opponent. So yeah, and you want to use Deathly Swarm to try to remove condies and bounce them back. And yeah, so you have just tons of condi from corrupting boons, right? Your Scepter 3, your Axe 3, your Shroud 2, and then you can proc Chill of Death. So this is a really good build for killing bunkers because of the insane corruptions that you're allowed to have, but also because this build is somewhat good at fighting squishies, right? Because it's kind of bursty as well. It is a little bit more rampy damage, so it's not as much burst as like a Power Reaper, but it does have really good debilitating conditions on it. So you really do counter thieves a lot of times if you can keep weakness on them and stuff like that. So I feel that this build is actually really fun and actually pretty close to being viable. The only issue with it is it has trouble surviving while being outnumbered, right? Because a lot of your sustain comes from the constant doing damage, but if you're kiting and playing so safe, you're not getting all that value from hitting things, right? Because hitting things is giving you the might and the weakness and all that sustain, right? So yeah, it does suffer a little bit because it's very one-dimensional, right? A lot of your skills are, you're not using staff, and staff is the kiting weapon. But that said, you do have Spectral Walk if you really need to, you know, get out. Spectral Walk is really good. So yeah. So as you can see in this match, I'm testing out the Chilling Darkness trait, but that's only really good when the enemy team has no Condi on it. And as you can see, Naro just swapped to Scourge, so I should have went back to Plague Sending, but both are kind of good still. I would probably say that Plague Sending is a little bit more reliable, but the Chilling Darkness is really good too. And as you can see, I'm just spamming Your Soul Is Mine because it just gives me Shroud, right? And that's kind of the weakness of Necromancers, is that they don't have Shroud at the very beginning, so having the ability to get Shroud without being in combat is actually really nice. And right here I get jumped on by the NG, who looks like they're running a full burst build, but I juke with the Spectral Walk, and then I go back down because I you know, Necro is actually kind of like a winning matchup against NG because it has so much corrupt, and NGs don't really deal with that many Condis on them very well. But I am kind of low, so I don't really want to chase that NG because he could outmaneuver me with the terrain, and I just jump on their Necro on the our side of the map, right? And they put down a bunch of Condis here, so I just back off, use my dagger 4 to get all the excess Condis off of me, and then I can just keep, you know, bursting in with Shroud. As you can see, I'm at 25 might, and I've barely been in this encounter. Now my might drops off very quickly if I'm not attacking things, but it ramps up really quickly when I am. So yeah, at this point I use Suffer while I'm in my dodge animation because there's no animation to Suffer, right? You can just combine Suffer with so many things and just debilitate people by chilling them and weakness. And as you can see, this NG here has chill and weakness on him, and he's not going to escape, right? He's going to die. So especially with the Chilling Darkness, right? That's really good in this situation. So the enemy Guardian Signet is down, so we know we've got that kill. And at this point, we've kind of started to snowball, so I'm going to go and cap nodes. But their Soul Beast is kind of around here. So I kind of want my team to cap the nodes so I could keep snowballing, but we do have a Scourge. And I think the Scourges do it with the Firebrand, so I'll let them stay together, and I'll just play the role of the capper. And now I'm going to go into Far, but they've already started respawning, so we kind of have to be careful. Always pressure the Necro because it's easier to land damage on a Necro than on a Guardian, and you'll get more cooldowns out of the Guardian first. And yeah, I get a 9k Executioner Scythe, and this is like a Condi build, so that's a really high amount of damage, right? And that's because I have so much might and Vuln, right? So yeah, the build really scales well with Condis, or with power as well as Condi, which is very uncharacteristic of most hybrid builds, right? They're usually way more Condi oriented than power. Here I am kind of low on Condi guns, right, because I didn't take Plague Sending, but we can rally off of this warrior if yeah, so we do get the rally, but it isn't really safe for me to go back in because yeah, I'm getting zoned by the shade, and for me to go in, yeah, I have to run through a lot of damage. So this is a really dangerous position. I'm most likely dead, yeah. So, but we do have the rest of the map, though that's going to be very shortly held because now we're gonna get snowballed. Yeah, our ranger falls, so now we're a 3v5 on the map. They're gonna push in a mid and get that instantly. So yeah, respawning here, just spamming your soul is mine, and this build kind of lacks a little bit on the swiftness, right? You only get the Warhorn and the Spectral Walk as your swiftness, but you don't want to really use those just for swiftness all the time. So sometimes you choose to not go for using them and you just go slower. And here I've gotten a lot of the cooldowns out of the Soul Beast out very quickly. And they've used a lot of their cooldowns or boons, right, which I've corrupted, and they can't really escape at this point. Like, yeah, as you can see, like this build really handles boon classes very well, and this is a very like boon oriented Soul Beast build that they're running. So it actually is really strong against the meta, because the meta is very boon oriented. And remember to look at those boon conversion tables, right, because you get weakness from might, which is more synergy for the build. And of course blind gives chill, right, with chilling darkness. So if they have fury, that would convert from a corruption into blind and then chill, and then that would give vulnerability. So it's just like really good synergy with this build. That's why I really like it, and sometimes kind of don't want to run Plague Sending, but yeah, Plague Sending is probably better, even though it's way less synergy. So I precast my Executioner Scythe into the ending of the Soul Beast animation. Just use Suffer while I'm above them. That's really nice about Shouts, is that they ignore Z axis kind of. So that's nice. And here I just press Shroud, and you can see the NG's already got a ton of weakness on him just from me pressing Shroud, which gives me a lot of self-peel for that res attempt, but obviously I can't really do that much with it because another person comes in. And here I just use my Spectral Walk to juke, and I go in with the insane corrupts, right? You see all the condies on this NG, that's just from corrupts basically, so that's really nice. And I get some sustain off of just the life siphoning of the Shouts, right? And I should have precasted my Fear there, but I was pretty sure that the Soul Beast couldn't stop me. At this point, we're looking to... Our rotations are kind of weird because we don't own a home, but we're trying to like get kills. I don't know, I feel like our NG should be... Oh, he's 1v2, okay. So yeah, I'm just looking for a kill on their warrior at mid, because if I go into home, it'll be just evening out the fight, right? I want to kill what's closest to me and then move out from there. And in roads, I do get rampaged here, and I waste my dodge. So when he rampaged, I kind of panicked and used my dodge just to line of sight, but really what I should have done was just gone into line of sight without using the dodge, and then conserve my dodges for the actual rampage abilities. So yeah, I probably could have survived there, but it was just a rampage when I had no cooldowns basically, so I was pretty much dead. And here I'm just respawning and trying to flip the map from here. Their Necro is caught out by themselves, so this is pretty free kill. And I don't want to spend too much time here because, right, if we're outnumbering somewhere, that means we're being outnumbered elsewhere, right? And my NG is dying because of that. So, you know, you have to kind of at some point realize, well, at this point, the Necro is 100% dead, so I can leave, right? So that's what I did. I stayed until I knew 100% the Necro would die, and then I left. And yeah, so we're in kind of like an even fight here because it's like a 4v4. I know that my Soul Beast can fight that warrior, especially when the warrior's out of cooldowns, and I just go into mid and immediately do a ton of corrupts on the Guardian, which helps my teammates to kill it, right? Because I do so much vuln and remove the boons. So cleave this out because I see their Necro coming in, and I miss my Dagger 4, so that's really detrimental to the build because I lose a lot of Condi clear if I miss the ability, right? but I land a really nice Executioner Scythe into Soul Spiral, which, as you can see, it does so much weakness, right? Because the chills are constantly proccing, which gives constant Vuln, right? So I had about like 25 Vuln. However, I get pulled and rampaged again, so that was kind of unfortunate. But yeah, as I said, 25 Vuln, 25 Might, no matter what kind of amulet you're using, you're going to be doing a lot of damage, so that's why I could kind of turn that fight so easily. Now at this point, I just want to get this kill on the Ranger because that means my Engineer can rotate out, but if they're chasing the Ranger out on roads like that, then they're kind of stuck, but I'm also kind of getting baited around with the stealth and stuff. And I see their NG is far, right? And this is the Rifle Turret NG. And to me, that's like a free kill because they don't have Elixir S, so they have really no counter to the Condis that I can give them. So as long as I land my Corrupts and they don't random dodge me, then I'm fine. So all I need to do is, yeah, look at that. I just pressed F1 there, and I basically did all of their life, right? Because, you know, when they use the Hollow Forge ability, you pretty much know they're going to jump on you, right? They're not going to really kite with it. So all I did was press F1, hit them with all the Corrupts. They gained so many Condis just from that one thing, and then Soul Spiral just finished them off. So yeah, it's kind of like a free kill to fight NGs that don't know how to kite you. And at this point, I don't want to stay, even though that's a free kill and I could just stay at far and just win that matchup. I don't want my team to die without me at mid, and I know that well, actually, to be honest, I'm not the only Necro. Even though I am the Necro role, there are other Necros, right, in this match, so maybe I should have stayed far. However, I would have been outnumbered, as you can see, because their Necro came off respawn, and their NG also was there. So actually, yeah, it was a good play for me to go to mid, because I would have just died there, but instead, I snowballed mid, and then I pushed back into far with the players that I had gotten. And here, they're kind of like getting the res with the Blood Necro, but our teammate isn't like cleaving or holding the res for some reason. So that was kind of bad because that's a Scourge right there. They should have had insane cleave on the body with me, but we didn't, and they won the rally race. And what that means is, even though we have the rest of the map, we're kind of outnumbered, so we want to kind of play off the node at this point. And my Dagger 4 is off cooldown soon, so I want to survive until then. So I get the Dagger 4, and that cleanses all my Condis, and that allows me to even transfer a lot of Condis back as well, which is insanely good because Scourges often give you Torment and Burning, right? And if you transfer those, then you get really high value bursts, so that allows me to kind of turn the table there with the Dagger 4. And here I'm just spamming shouts because they ignore Z-axis, sort of. They have like an orbital radius, so it's really nice for kiting because it basically ignores terrain. So that's why shouts are really strong. And just going on this Guardian again, this is a free kill, right? Because I have Corrupts and my whole team is here. So yep, as soon as I didn't even need to go in Shroud there, but as soon as I went in Shroud, I would have got that kill. And this NG here, like I said, is really free. Look at all those Condis. I even got Stability corrupted there, so we just got insane amount of value from those Corrupts, and the NG is dead. So we're going to start chasing this kill. 2 Necros versus 1 Ranger. He's not going to have enough Condi clear. He does kite though, so I can't really land my damage, so I decide to go back to mid, and the Warriors here, and Rampage Warriors are the best thing for me to see, right? Because I have so much Corrupt, I can like permanently fear a warrior that's in Rampage because they get pulsing stability, right? So that can basically pulse fear if I land enough Corrupts in a row. And I think that they have, the Signet's up, but we actually have enough pressure to keep getting kills through that Signet. However, their NG's kiting, and I have to kind of back off because my team our targeting isn't really good right now. No one's really targeting, so we do get the kill on the NG, but I feel really pressured here. Is kind of the reason why I feel kind of uneasy just watching this. But my team actually does get the kill, and then they're kind of sticking together on me. So we're actually pretty good, in a good situation right now. We see the Necros going to decap home, but if I go there, I'm not going to get there in time. So it's more value for me to stay here and just kill this Guardian because, yeah, like someone respawning can just hold home. Or it wouldn't have mattered anyway. So yeah, me just getting kills is my job, right? So it's not my job to prevent the decap at home or something like that. It's my ranger's job, right? And they just kind of died. So it's kind of unfortunate that they did die because that means we're going to lose this game. They needed to survive, but they chose to, I don't know if they played too greedy, but I know that this NG is a free kill because I have tons of corrupts, and however, maybe I should have gone home because we'd already gotten the decap here, so possibly through the game by going to plus far instead of plussing home. But I figured we had already lost home, and I wasn't really... Oh, yeah, I don't think it was winnable anyways because it was timing out. Yeah, the match was timing out. But, yeah, as you can see, like, this build has really high pressure in it. It just kind of lacks the burst sustain, right, that you need against, like, Revenants and Hollows, like, in larger fights. But it does have really good sustained survivability, right, from the Blighter's Boon.